Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan doing an Instagram Live for the first time, so bear with us. Some people are waving at me. Thanks so much for joining. You know, we're 2 weeks away from the big day of election, and we just posted on Psychology Today a blog about how to stay sane during this period of the pre-election and beyond, because whatever happens November 5th, in my mind, we've got till January 7th or 8th, and then years after that, hopefully, to correct the damage that's been done over 50 years, bringing us to this moment where we're actually worried about losing democracy and authoritarianism taking over. So all I can say is that I remain optimistic, but it's a slog that we have going forward, and I really want to encourage people to stay sane. So as a mental health professional, what I want to start with is it's your mind and only you can control it, which means don't allow others to control it, including social media apps that sap you from valuable sleep time. We have to stay in our bodies, in the here and now, focused, and thinking what's within our control and what's outside of our control. And if it's outside of our control, don't spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about it. Because, and this is another tip that I tell my clients and others, is if you have the same thought 3 times, ask yourself, is there any new information? And is it anything I can do something about? And if the answer is no new information and it's out of our control, then you need to what we call compartmentalize that. Put it in a box, put it in a closet, and I'm not saying forget about it forever, but what you can do is schedule worry time. So you can literally go to your calendar and put 5-minute moments where you can catastrophize and ruminate and think downside planning. But again, if you find yourself losing control of your mind, where fear is taking over, worry is taking over, or these ruminating thoughts are taking over, get control of your mind. Go dance. Go listen to music, go walk in the woods, play with your kid, play with your animal, learn what to do, meditate, pray, chant, do yoga, do something that's going to help you stay sane in your body, in the here and now, with a confidence, with the locus of control is in you, and be present, but be oriented to a positive future you, is what I say. Because too many trauma survivors, which is typical with former cult members, they can be processing the past, but not processing it in an effective way, and reliving trauma over and over again, which is known as PTSD. Really not a great idea. And I teach people to separate out associated memories and dissociated memories. The only associated memories you want of your past are positive ones, where when you relive that memory, it brings joy or lightness to your heart or feelings of awe and wonder. Great. But if you're in the past reliving a trauma, then you need to make it a dissociated memory, not reliving it associatedly. See your younger you on a TV screen where the bad stuff is happening, knowing you're safe in the here and now. So thanks for all the folks that are chiming in and thanking me for my work. To be honest, it keeps me going to hear from folks who tell me that they've read Combating Cult Mind Control and it helped their life, or that they listened to a podcast and it started a chain reaction where they started to realize that they had been unduly influenced. And so it keeps me going because honestly, I just get harassed with disinformation and ad hominem attacks on me. And I'll just comment briefly, and it's not something that I want to promote because that's a rule of thumb with disinformation campaigns is you don't want to amplify it to give the bad people more attention. But there's a group of cult apologists that I won't name here that are hired, just like big tobacco hired so-called experts to say smoking doesn't cause cancer, and fossil fuel industry hired experts using the Moonies to do climate science denial. Cults have hired sociologists of religion to say there's no such thing as a cult, and they're all new religious movements, and there's no such thing as brainwashing. And all I can say is there's brainwashing or thought reform or coercive control, undue influence. I like the term mind control in an authoritarian sense, and I, in fact, did my doctoral dissertation on the BITE model of authoritarian control, because unlike my mentors, Robert Lifton, Margaret Singer, Edgar Schein, Louis Jolyon West, and Philip Zimbardo, who just passed away from Stanford, the Stanford prison experiment, the existing models before the BITE model are qualitative studies, meaning interviews with former victims to flesh out what are the variables. But the BITE model offers very specific variables, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control variables that anyone can reality test for themselves. And in fact, my doctoral dissertation, I did a study, and it's been confirmed out of BU. We're readying an application with a shorter questionnaire of 40 questions instead of 132 odd questions, where you can answer on a never to always scale and get an actual number on the influence continuum. For those of you who've never heard of the influence continuum, it's the name of my podcast. You can download this graphic for free on freedomofmind.com, ethical to unethical, and it's the BITE model criteria that defines authoritarian control. So there are a number of things that I want to talk about, but I'm very interested in, if you want to ask me questions, my trusty assistant Cami can direct me to those questions. And this is, my first time live, so we'll learn as we go along. So what I want to state categorically, first and foremost, is that Trump has the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders. And in the Cult of Trump book, which was just re-released with a foreword by George Conway, the conservative attorney, whose ex-wife, Kelly Ann, is a major Trump player, and an afterword by myself. Anyway, and George Conway has an anti-psychopath pack, which I see on X, and he does ads, and he basically says the media has fallen down by not allowing mental health experts to speak about psychopathology of Donald Trump. Anyway, back to Eric Fromm. This is a list that's also for free on my website, freedomofmind.com, under Learn and Undue Influence. You can download this. Eric Fromm was trying to ascribe characteristics of Adolf Hitler, and he came up with this term of not just regular narcissism, but malignant narcissism. So it's the standard narcissistic components: grandiose, self-centered behavior, fantasies of power, success, and attractiveness, need for praise and admiration, sense of entitlement, lack of empathy, very key, an inability to step into someone else's shoes and imagine what they're feeling and experiencing. But here's the psychopathological stuff: thinking they're above the law, pathological lying, interpersonally exploitative, sadistic, harassing and silencing, violent, paranoid, and inability to trust friends and subordinate. Sounds like Donald Trump? Bingo. And in my book, The Cult of Trump, I compared Trump with my former cult leader, Sun Myung Moon, who claimed to be the Messiah. And the Moonies are still very much big actors in the cult of Trump, I should add. Hubbard of Scientology, and Jim Jones of the People's Temple. So Trump really is teaching everyone on planet Earth about cult leader characteristics. So in that way, it's created a thirst amongst us normal folks for all kinds of cult books and podcasts and docuseries, etc., for people to have a deeper understanding. The problem I have as an ex-Moonie who's been doing this work for 48 years is that most of the stuff that's going out on docuseries is what it seems to me to be trauma porn. It's telling stories of abuse and extreme manipulation, but it's not explaining the techniques. It's not explaining how to protect yourself, what to do about it if a family member or a friend is involved with it. And so I watch these shows and I'm so frustrated that it's a lost opportunity. Excuse me. So I've covered the malignant narcissist characteristics of the cult leader. I want to talk about cults that are influencing MAGA and the cult of Trump, and whose membership comprise a large portion of the cult of Trump. And I'm hoping that if you haven't read The Cult of Trump, you will listen to it, or go to your library if you're on a budget, and learn, because MAGA is not going away no matter what happens during the election. This is going to be a many-year project to do psychoeducation and not only preventive education, but training mental health professionals, educators, politicians, media people, and destigmatizing the notion that if you are in a mind control cult, you're somehow weak or stupid or there's something wrong with you, which is just bogus. So many of my friends are absolutely brilliant, and they've been in all different types of mind control cults forever. So, Puppeteers, I put in the top of chapter 7, Vladimir Putin. And in my research since writing the book, I learned that actually Trump was recruited as an asset by the Soviet Union in the late 80s. So this is not a new thing, and no one should be surprised at all that Russia and Putin are deep involved with the cult of Trump. I also wrote in the book about a cult called The Family. There are 100+ groups called The Family. My former cult called themselves The Family too. But this one is the group that does the National Prayer Breakfasts. Jeffrey Charlotte wrote 2 books and a Netflix series called The Family. Worth checking out. Opus Dei. I recently interviewed Gareth Gore on his fantastic book on Opus Dei. This is a right-wing Catholic authoritarian cult that has influenced Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation, and Project 2025. This is all Opus Dei cult terrain. So if you haven't come to Substack and started reading my archives and such, I've opened it for free through the election. Of course, if anybody wants to help support my work, it means that I can get the message out in a bigger and bigger way going forward, because so far I've just been subsidizing through my own consulting fees my activism over the years. Unless you think people make millions of dollars writing books, it just isn't true. And for all the hours I spent researching and doing the cult of Trump, honestly, I have not made the fortune that I was hoping to make if it sold millions of copies. Still a chance to buy it and donate it to your local library, etc. Anyway, back to other major cults in the cult of Trump. So we talked about Putin, the family, Opus Dei, New Apostolic Reformation cults. We're talking 30 million, 40 million Americans in these NAR authoritarian cults, and up to 900 million worldwide. And the media has missed the boat calling these folks Christian evangelicals. These are mind control cults with somebody claiming to be a prophet. They put their hand over their head. You're a prophet or an apostle. And they claim to speak to God directly, and they claim to be able to speak in tongues, which is known as glossolalia, which I can do. I taught myself. But I don't, it's not the Holy Spirit, I can assure you. It's a altered state of consciousness. And they claim to cast out demons and do faith healings. And it's these groups that have told their indoctrinated followers that God told them that Trump won the 2020 election, and therefore you shouldn't believe any of the judges, the 60 judges, or all the former Trump officials who said Biden won the 2020 election. And it's these blind followers thinking they're in a holy war, doing spiritual warfare against the demonic Democrats, which, by the way, was my mindset as a Moonie. This is like exactly what I was trained in 1974 when I was taken to see The Exorcist. And Sun Myung Moon said, God made The Exorcist. This movie's a prophecy of what will happen to you if you leave the Unification Church. The mindset is the same mindset. Fear of demonic possession to the point that members have to do thought stopping if they have a doubt, or and the phobia indoctrination that they'll be possessed by demons if they question the group or leave it. Huge number. I think I added the NRA in the cult of Trump. We know now Russia infiltrated the NRA. Marina Butina was in here telling everyone they need to buy assault rifles. My former cult has an AR-15 factory and car arms factory in Pennsylvania, and they have training compounds in Tennessee and Waco, Texas, teaching people for Civil War, utilizing vets. And Sean Moon has a crown of golden AR-15 bullets and calls himself the king. I mean, imagine growing up in a cult where your father claims to be the Messiah, and he's stooping and having illegal babies who were raised by Bohi Pak, which we know for a fact with the Moonies. Anyway, I'm digressing. So the point is we have a major cult problem, mind control problem, and now I get to rant for a minute about the CIA and other state agencies, the FSB and China's secret. All these entities know that you can brainwash people. They've been studying it for decades. They've certainly read my stuff, and I will confess that the CIA tried to recruit me 3 times, DOD twice, Department of Defense, and I basically said I'm an American. I'm happy to consult, but I'm not signing NDA and working for a covert organization ever again. And I really think of myself as a human rights advocate and therapist and activist. Today, we posted a very interesting interview with a woman who sued Pornhub because they were taking advantage of minors who were being raped and assaulted and brutalized, and she took them on, wrote a book about it, created a nonprofit. This is the kind of work that I think is truly what we should be spending our time on, is preventing victims, taking down the predators and the predatory organizations, and getting rule of law back. So I can rant on and on some more if you want, but and I'm not sure if Cami, you're able to signal me or text me any questions, but I'd be happy to do some questions and answers to folks on my live. And where can people buy my book right now? On the Instagram chat, I have no idea. I know that on freedomofmind.com under books, there are links to numerous sites, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Google, Apple Books. They're really everywhere. So Cami, if you can give me some questions, because I'm unable to see anything on my website, even though I have Instagram opened up. And I do want to encourage anyone, if you know any influencers with big followings, especially former cult members who may not know of combating cult mind control or the cult of Trump, reach out to them. Let's network. Let's create more awareness, please. So now I am seeing a link from Cami. Thanks, Cami. But I'm not seeing any questions that I should answer yet. Someone said a little more on the influence continuum. Sure, happily. So if you haven't downloaded a copy of this yet, go to freedomofmind.com and go to Learn Influence Continuum and download it. I have variables on the ethical side and variables on the unethical side. On the individual level, about ethical leadership and unethical leadership, ethical organizations and unethical ones. And let's see, what am I looking at? I am sending you messages to Zoom. I don't think you saw them. I'm not looking at Zoom. So, don't send messages to me on Zoom. I can open it on Zoom if you think that that's the best place. Yes, Cami? Nod. Yes, no, maybe so. And for people who are therapists, I literally created a CE course for you 9 hours. You can get CE continuing ed credits. We did a whole blog on 11 things I wish my therapist would wish that my therapist knew. Because there's no formal training to therapists about undue influence, people raised in mind control cults. So I have audio, podcasts. I'm just trying to generate as much content as I can. I intend to do more lives, and we'll get more organized, and maybe we'll get questions ahead of time that people want to know about. I'd love to just inspire a movement, a freedom of mind movement, where people are teaching each other how to protect your minds, your family, your friends, how to convey. So now, Cami, I am on Signal on yours, and I'm not seeing a single thing. So if you're trying to send me any questions, I'm not seeing them yet. And I don't know if you can hear me, Cami. What else do I want to say? I want to say that, oh yeah, I went off on a tangent and I want to cycle back. So the CIA, the FSB, the Chinese intelligence agencies, they know what brainwashing is, but they haven't told the public that it even exists. And back in 1978, when Jonestown happened and 913 Americans died and a congressman was assassinated, there was a whole inquiry in Congress about mind control, and I was invited by Senator Dole to come to D.C. to be part of a public hearing. And when I arrived in D.C., I was told that they've taken me off the agenda with a former People's Temple member. And I learned that the Moonies were picketing against Bob Dole and threatening that he wouldn't be able to run for president if he was going to continue to persecute religions. So my rant is really about the government knows brainwashing exists, and yet no official is saying anything publicly. So it's left to people like myself who studied this deeply to tell the truth. However, I'm shadow banned and ghosted. And I used to be on mainstream media all the time. They're not having me on anymore. So the question is, who's running corporate media? What's their agenda? And is it true that they really don't want the public to be educated? Now, someone's asking, how do we deprogram a third of the country after the election? It starts with educating yourself. So if somebody says to you, how can I tell if I'm in an authoritarian cult or not, would you know how to respond to them? Well, I tried to do something to make it easy, and I did a TEDx talk called How Can I Know If I've Been Brainwashed? If you haven't seen it yet, there's a link to it on my website, freedomofmind.com. I believe it's under press, under the press tab. And I outline a 4-step reality testing strategy. But here's the deal. You can't attack the leader, the doctrine, or a group's policies head on, calling people names. That's counterproductive. That makes people more deeply entrenched in the mindset. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is not persuade through facts or belittle people and get them to be bullied into accepting our point of view. We want to ask questions in a respectful, a genuinely respectful, curious way, asking people questions and waiting with silence for them to think about it, give an answer, and then do a follow-up question. So it starts with educating yourself, and I can't tell you how many people have told me, oh, I bought the Cult of Trump and sent it to my Uncle Fred because he's a MAGA. I'm like, don't buy the Cult of Trump and give it to a MAGA person because they're going to throw it out. They're not going to read it. You read it. Then you can say, hey, I read this book, but I would love your opinion. If I send you a copy, would you be willing to read it and talk with me about it? That might work if you had a formally good relationship. But the fact is, about changing a third of the country, it's going to need not only government, public health emergency declaration, but we're going to need to develop inoculation programs to institute in all public and private schools. And I recommend my mentor Philip Zimbardo's Heroic Imagination Project for this purpose. HeroicImagination.org is the website. It has snippets of social psychology experiments with a curriculum of questions that a teacher or a parent can discuss to teach people about the fact that we're biopsychosocial beings, that we think we're rational, but we're actually primarily emotional, and we rationalize a lot. And while we like to think we're our own person, we're actually very influenced by our environment and by people that we identify with in our environment. And therefore, psychoeducation, inoculation, training mental health professionals, clergy, educators, media people, and then creating recovery support networks for people coming out. And let me tell you, people, there are tens of millions of former cult members in the United States. Tens of millions of us. They're mostly not being public because they're afraid of the stigma. Oh, you're in a cult. What's wrong with you? You're weak. You're stupid. There's defective. And it's like, no, we were situationally vulnerable. Maybe we had a tough childhood. Maybe we came from an authoritarian country where we weren't encouraged to think for ourselves. Maybe we were corporally punished and trained to be obedient. The point is that the way we're going to do this is by helping each other, which runs opposite the MAGA cult's primary ideology, which is black and white, us versus them, good versus evil, hatred and fear oriented. I say love, kindness, compassion, empathy, warmth is what's going to help get people out of these cults. And I can tell you, because I've been doing this work for almost 5 decades, I have so many examples of my friends who told me they left the hate group because people they were supposed to hate were nicer to them than the people in their own group. So I see Cammie's giving me a few more questions. We want to share all of your books, Dr. Hassan, because it helped a lot. Great, thank you. You know, sharing what helped you is always a powerful testimonial that something had value. And when I read a great book, I love sharing it with people. And I read all the time. And my most recent book that I finished and I did a podcast on is on Opus Dei by Gareth Gore. Right now I'm reading Den of Spies by Craig Unger. But I'm always up for reading other books that are important. Grumble.not says we have both individual and collective responsibility to ourselves and others to be a good human and good citizen. Emphasis on duty and behavior done with civility, do no harm. Rock on. That's the message. Any suggestions for a household in a rural area that likes to have local children over, knowing she might be the only different opinions and thoughts than what they get in the red community? So I did an interview with two leaders in the Braver Angels organization. And if you haven't heard of braverangels.org, check them out. They have been around for years. I've been supporting them for years. They get people from red and blue together in the same room talking to each other as human beings and listening to each other. They're not trying to convert each other. They're just trying to understand another point of view. And I did a very important interview with two leaders who had done a nationwide project asking people what would constitute a free and fair election. And so they only published the results that were unanimous between blue and red. And I interviewed the two gents, and there's a whole executive summary if you don't want to read the entire report. And I'd like to encourage more people to read this report, share the report, and because we know that that MAGA is going to claim the election is stolen, even if there's overwhelming numbers in even the battleground states, they've already set it up that it's hacked. They're already talking about Dominion machines, even though Fox lost something like $1 billion because they were saying that Dominion voting machines were doing fraud. The disinformation is happening already. So let's go on to some other questions. So the point is, in rural communities, be a good person. Be warm. Listen to people. Ask them if they consider another opinion. Share short videos and ask for people's opinion as a basis for talking points. Oh, and here's another critical point. And I wrote a whole book called Freedom of Mind, Helping Loved Ones Leave Controlling People, Cults, and Beliefs. And while you're not supposed to, and it's not effective to attack the leader, the doctrine, or the group directly, what does work is talking about other groups. And with MAGA, talking about Chinese communist brainwashing works, and talking about pimps and traffickers. They're interested to hear either of those. And with those topic areas, you can talk about the influence continuum and the bite model and start a conversation that gets people thinking and reality testing. Someone's asking me, am I nervous about drawing attention to bad authoritarian, knowing many are dangerous? No, it's more that I don't want to amplify disinformation or promote them. This was the mistake that the mainstream media did during the 2016 election. They wound up giving Trump an estimated $2 billion of free advertising because every time Trump would say an outrageous thing, the mainstream media had to do a whole story on it. And it was Trump, 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 and it just blew out the possibility of other news and other perspectives other than saying how crazy Trump was. It was a very clever social psychology technique that Trump used. Have I received threats because of my work? Of course. But you know, when I first left the Moonies, I honestly didn't believe I would be alive within a year. I thought they would assassinate me. And one of the first things I did, aside from being a whistleblower for a congressional investigation into Korean CIA activities in the U.S., was I sat down in front of a camera and told everything that I thought was important. And we made 3 copies, put them in 3 different lawyers' safes, sent the Moonies a letter that if anything happened to me, that the material would be released with big press conferences, and it would be worse for them. And I never honestly imagined that I'd be alive 48 years of doing this stuff full time, but here I am. So I must be doing something right, or maybe God is protecting me. I do believe in God. I'm not an atheist. But I don't believe in a mythological, anthropomorphized guy with a beard who's white floating in the clouds, obviously. But I do want to believe that the universe is a friendly place, and ultimately we're going to get ourselves out of the mess that malignant narcissists have put us into with all of the horrible global climate crisis that's happening. How do I respond to Christians who post sarcastic and cruel comments on social media? I ignore a lot of the cruel and sarcastic comments, and one of the recent interviews last week's was with Amanda Tyler, who has a book coming out, I believe tomorrow, officially, called How to End Christian Nationalism. And she's one of the religious folks saying, no, we want separation of church and state. We want people to have minority religious opinions and practice. We don't want a theocracy. So we want to amplify good people who are speaking out for sanity, for compassion, for love, for rule of law, for sure. Someone's asking me, is the Jehovah's Witnesses a cult? In short, yes. And I will tell you, when my first book came out in 1988, Combating, I started getting letters. Remember snail mail, like before the internet? I started getting letters saying, loved your book. How come you didn't talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses? And my response was, why should I talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses? And what I heard back was, I underlined your entire book because it applied to the Watchtower Society, and the principal person who I credit in educating me was a former Bethel elder named Randall Waters, and he said, come to LA, I'll organize a group of ex-witnesses, and we'll teach you about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you'll teach us about exit counseling. And I said, great. And in the updated edition of Combating, I have the story about Jehovah's Witnesses in Chapter 6, along with the Mormons and other groups that were not included in the original book when I did it. Go to my website, put in Jehovah's Witnesses in the search box, or come to Substack and search keywords and see if I've done stuff in the past. And it will jumpstart your healing process, I guarantee you. Somebody says all federal members of Congress and presidential candidates need psych evals. I agree. In fact, I was at a press conference in D.C. with Dr. Bandy Lee, who's a forensic psychiatrist, and a number of other experts talking about Trump's unfitness for duty, and how in the government, if you're anywhere near nuclear subs or nuclear reactors or bombs of any kind, you need a psych eval every year to be fit, to be near something. But the president, who controls all of it, doesn't need to have a psych eval? Please. So then the question is there a way to do a psych eval in a way that is nonpartisan, that is focused on the public good? And my answer is yes, of course we can do this. And we can put the 25th Amendment in with some changes in place, that if the president starts acting erratically, that he can be taken out of power. It's these types of checks and balances we need to put back in place. Wow, our time is flying by. I see we have about 15, 16 minutes left. This is being recorded, so people who didn't see the whole thing can catch it from the beginning. Let's see some other questions. They're recovering from Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, I mean, so let me just say, as a therapist, people born and raised in authoritarian countries or cults, and I do think a country can be a cult, political cult, not a religious cult necessarily, they're going to have more to do than someone like myself. I was recruited at age 19, and was only fortunately in for 2.5 years because I nearly died in a van crash. So for me, I had an identity to go back to and my family and friends to go back to so I could make a more successful transition. That said, it still took me a year and therapy to kiss a woman without having the cult indoctrination go off in my head, for example. Over the decades, we've gotten more and more knowledge about how to speed up the healing process, and that's what I do professionally, and I plan to teach more public workshops for therapists as well as the public to have access to my knowledge base. There was another point I wanted to make and I just spaced out, so forgive me for that. So I was saying people born into cults or people who were recruited into cults, they have a little bit different track for healing, but it's all about who am I, being in your body, in the here and now, having an internal locus of control for your decision making, learning good decision making, not looking for someone to tell you what to think, how to feel, what to do with your life, and having a positive future orientation, and just really understanding how our neuroscience works, how social psychology works, knowing how to reality test a relationship or a group so you don't get into another bad group or relationship, which I see all the time. There's a lot of ex-cult members in the cult of Trump. I'm shocked, but it's true. And again, if you don't understand mind control, you're looking for that certainty or you're reacting to those patterns that are triggering your cult identity that you thought maybe you got rid of, but you didn't. What do I think of La Luz del Mundo? I think it's a mind control cult. In fact, I interviewed Socio Martin. Check out my Substack and my interview with Socio. And HBO did a 3-parter on La Luz del Mundo. And we're working on developing not just, we have my dissertation in Spanish now, my Influence Continuum in Spanish now, the BITE model in Spanish now on my freedomofmind.com website. But I'm training therapists who are fluent in English and Spanish to help folks who are bilingual or Spanish speaking. What are my thoughts on evangelical Christianity as a whole? There's an initiation baptism, use of fear and hell and shame. So again, for me, I teach the influence continuum, which means it's not a binary, it's terrible or it's wonderful, and I'm not a humanist, although I have great respect for humanists and atheists. I think most groups are somewhere in the middle. And I think it also matters, I have another graphic from my work. Where are you? Are you a fringe member? You're not going to feel as extremely abused as if you're up here. And if you're up here, you know stuff that everybody else doesn't know. So when you're thinking about a membership in a group, it's not homogenous, and it can be very different, especially if there's any therapists listening. So I identify as a Jew. I am not a extreme practitioner, and I abhor the religious extremism that's in Israel, the horrific stuff. I'm with the Benny Gantz and the let's have a two-state solution framework. I think Netanyahu's in the cult of Trump. I wrote about him in my book, In the Jewish Right. I'm a moderate. I'm not perfect. I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm changing. But just think of me, I hope, as a human rights advocate. Women's rights, gay rights, indigenous rights, human rights, and rule of law, and not having a corrupt Supreme Court that doesn't respect the Constitution, who just gave Trump immunity. This is so bogus. So my hope is we win a supermajority. We expand the Supreme Court, initiate term limits for Supreme Court justices, vet people for their competency in the legal system. And I want to criminalize brainwashing and mind control. That's my big lift for the rest of my life, is if I can help educate judges and juries and the public how to not see undue influence as a slippery slope where only minors can be unduly influenced or elderly people with dementia, but to really show the influence continuum and the bite model and malignant narcissism. And I use Shefflin, a law professor, colleague and friend of mine, social influence model. I want everyone to understand the difference between ethical influence and unethical influence. So, how am I doing so far, Cami? It's we got 9 minutes left for our initial thing, and hopefully we'll do some more. And hopefully we'll get some more big influencers on Instagram. I was recently interviewed about, I think her name is Lenz, Bethany Joy Lenz, has a new book out about her Bible cult experience. She was an actress. She has a huge following, and in the interviews I'm reading her doing, it doesn't appear that she's read Combating or understands cult mind control yet. But if Bethany, if you're listening to this, or anyone related to her wants to do a public or private consult with me, I'd be happy to do that and educate people about this stuff. Somebody's thanking me for the clarity, and I'm killing it, whatever that means. I guess it means I'm doing an okay job. And people say, how can you talk so fast? And I'm like, I've had a lot of practice. I've been doing this for 48 years. And with feedback, you kind of learn how to explain things in simple ways that make sense to people. And again, I want to just say, if you've grown up in an authoritarian family where you weren't encouraged to think for yourself and you were told to be obedient or else, this is a problem. This is not healthy human development. And I'm sorry you didn't have healthy family environment. I'll also say that there are some people out there saying estrange yourself from your family and your friends if they don't 100% agree with you. I think that is BS. I think that is such a dangerous ideology. But it serves mind controllers to say cut off from your family and friends. Because maybe your family and friends are saying, hey, you're being unduly influenced. Like, take a time out. And indeed, if you're sure that you're not in a cult and you're not brainwashed, take a time out. Sleep, eat, turn off your phone for a week. See if you can make a week without checking your social media. Because I think you'll find you're addicted. And you don't want to be controlled by your tech or by social media billionaires who are using your personal information to create profiles in the dark web and use it against you. No, we don't want that. And have friends in real life. If you have a choice to see a friend in real life versus Zoom or text, see them in real life. Hang out, hug each other, look in each other's eyes. You know, like, this is the best part of being in a free society. And have friends who have differing opinions than you, and talk respectfully. You know, it takes a village. I wanna have friends who have different opinions than me. I don't want to just be in a confirmation bias bubble. And have an attitude of, I want to learn, I want to grow. And that means stretching yourself. Let's see, how much do you think social media has contributed to extremism and the us versus them mindset? A lot. A lot. So if you're not familiar with the Center for Humane Technology, humanetech.com, and the work of Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin and their team, they did a documentary called The Social Dilemma. I highly recommend that documentary. Check out their podcast, Your Undivided Attention. Every time there's an episode, it's a must listen for me. Because they're at the cutting edge of looking at technology and AI and saying technology should serve humans. It shouldn't be the other way around. And technology, every advantage that gives humanity power or another tool has a dark side, has a downside, and that needs to be incorporated in any strategic planning. And I don't know if you've seen Geoffrey Hinton, who just won a Nobel Prize. He is one of the architects of AI. He's very worried. He says we have no way to control AI in the way things are proceeding because these billionaires are rushing to compete with each other for who can roll it out faster and longer. And this does not bode well for human rights and for freedom of mind. And again, I'm going to say it's your mind and only you should control it. And I am going to make an ethical appeal to join the freedom of mind movement. You know, talk about it and tell people, you know, you should have an internal locus of control for your thoughts and feelings and behavioral choices, not looking outside for some influencer to tell you what to think and what to feel and what to do. And my domain is just teaching this stuff so people can digest it and utilize it any way they want. Technology serves humans, not the other way around. Yes, exactly. Yes, thank you. It looks like an XJW. Yeah, so there are so many former Jehovah's Witnesses and former Mormons. And when I went out to Utah this year, 2024, with psychologist John Dehlin, he sat me down for Mormon Stories podcast of his for 2 3.5-hour interviews. No kidding. 7 hours of Steve Hassan being asked questions about my whole life before the Moonies and what I did in the Moonies and how I got deprogrammed out of the Moonies and my whole approach to helping people get out. So there's a lot of content out there for you that's free. And of course, there's some content that costs money. And if you have the ability to be supportive, great. And if not, that's fine. Just learn and grow and take care of yourself, please. And stay tuned to my channel because I'm planning to do more lives. In fact, we're talking about doing maybe a TikTok live, maybe doing a Spaces live, because I like to interact with people and answer people's questions. So if you enjoyed this Instagram Live, the link will get posted on my social media and my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan, and share it and ask your friends, check this out, tell me what you think, and give us feedback and tell us, we do something on this topic or that topic or whatever, or if you know of a good book that I should be aware of. I'm very limited in how much bandwidth I have, but I'm trying to do the big important things. And this week's blog and podcast is featuring a woman who took on Pornhub, and very important anti-trafficking work that she does. And we've put a whole bunch of links in the resources part of the blog that I mentioned in the interview with Layla Micklewhite. So thank you very much, everybody.